The hospital lobby was buzzing with activity, the white tile floors reflecting the cold, fluorescent lights overhead. In the corner, a father sat on a waiting room chair, his gaze fixed on the bright blue walls, though his thoughts were far away. Marcus Webb wasn't supposed to be here, not like this. But life had a funny way of humbling even the most prepared. His 6-year-old daughter, Lily, was tucked beside him, her small hand gripping his arm tightly, her other hand clutching a stuffed elephant. The pediatric checkup was routine, nothing to worry about. But this was the hospital. Everything felt serious when you walked through the front doors, and nothing ever felt like it belonged to you. Just hours earlier, Marcus had been knee-deep in mopping the floors of Ashford Industries corporate headquarters. A janitor's job was all he could get after the fall of his previous life. He had been an engineer once, a bright future, a good career, until Sarah's medical bills had drained everything they had. Now he worked as a janitor, wiping clean the same floors where engineers, who wore suits and held meetings about innovations he could have designed, walked past him. The humiliation, though constant. "Daddy," Lily's voice broke his thoughts. "Can we help the people who are sick?" He looked down at her, offering a small, weary smile. "We'll help in our own way, sweetheart. We always do." Just then, the hospital's intercom crackled, breaking the steady hum of conversation. Code red. O-negative blood needed immediately. Pediatric emergency. All compatible staff report to donation center. Marcus froze. His blood. O-negative. The rarest type. His blood could save a life. His heart pounded in his chest as his mind raced. What if someone needed it? What if a child's life depended on it? A thought flickered through his mind, the very thought that had gripped him earlier when he watched a little girl in the emergency room, gasping for breath, helpless. "Daddy." Lily's innocent voice tugged at him again. Her wide brown eyes were full of concern, her voice soft but unwavering. "Is it time?" Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "Yes, sweetheart, I think it's time." They made their way through the sterile halls of the hospital, where the hustle and bustle of staff made it feel like a place in perpetual motion. The donation center was packed with nurses and doctors already screening blood samples, desperate to find someone compatible. Marcus felt the eyes of staff dart toward him as he approached. A janitor coming to donate his blood? Their skepticism was palpable, but Marcus was used to it. Nothing was ever expected of a man like him. Just as he approached the intake desk, a woman rushed in. Victoria Ashford, the CEO of Ashford Industries, her face pale with panic. She wasn't supposed to be here either. But here she was, the woman who had dismissed him hours ago as a mere janitor, the woman who had humiliated him in front of dozens of employees. And now, the woman who needed him. Marcus saw her face tighten as she recognized him. He could see the moment of realization hit her. What was a janitor doing in a place like this? And yet, there he was, with the rarest blood type, the very thing her daughter needed to survive. His heart clenched. "Mr. Webb," the coordinator called, breaking the awkward silence. "You're a match. We need your help. Are you sure you're ready to donate?" Marcus glanced at Lily, still holding his hand. He had nothing left to give except this. But he could give this. He had to. He nodded. "I'm sure." As the needle slid into his arm, Marcus closed his eyes. He thought of Sarah, of the years spent trying to save her, and the years spent trying to build a life for Lily after her death. It wasn't much, but this was something. Lily stood beside him, her wide eyes never leaving his face. "You're helping, Daddy," she whispered. "You're saving someone." Victoria Ashford watched the scene unfold from the door. Her face, once filled with scorn for the janitor she had looked down upon, now reflected a dawning realization. The man who had been invisible to her was the one who would save her daughter's life. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was one she had to. Chapter 1 Summary. Marcus Webb, a janitor at Ashford Industries, is waiting for his daughter Lily's checkup when a hospital emergency arises. He is called upon to donate blood to save a child in need, unaware that the child is Victoria Ashford's daughter, the same CEO who humiliated him earlier that day. As Marcus donates, Victoria realizes that the man she had once dismissed as a janitor is the one who will save her daughter's life. The sterile scent of the hospital's donation center still lingered in Marcus's nostrils hours later, even as he and Lily sat in the hospital lobby, waiting for the taxi he had called. His body ached, fatigue from the blood donation, the dizziness he had fought through, but his heart felt a weight he hadn't expected. He glanced down at his daughter, who had fallen asleep in his lap. Her small form curled in his arms like a child who had no idea of the storm brewing around her. Lily's steady breathing was the only comfort in the chaos of his thoughts. He hadn't expected any of this. He hadn't expected to be saving the CEO's daughter, the woman who had humiliated him so coldly in the lobby that morning, or for her to witness the very man she had written off as nothing more than a janitor be the one to save her child's life. The thought brought a bitter taste to Marcus's mouth. Victoria Ashford had looked at him like he was invisible. Her eyes had swept over him with a dismissive glance, her voice sharp as she pointed out how his equipment was blocking her way. Just another meaningless man in the corporate world. Just another piece of machinery that kept her empire running. He hadn't fought back. He never did. After everything he'd been through, he'd learned that fighting for dignity in that world never did any good. All he needed to do was survive, just like he'd survived every other hardship life had thrown at him since Sarah's death. He looked down at Lily's sleeping face and felt the pang of loss again, sharp and unyielding. He thought of Sarah, his wife, and the dreams they had once shared, dreams that had been swallowed whole by illness and debt. She would never see this moment. She would never see him donating his blood, letting it flow into the body of a child he didn't even know. It was strange how quickly life could change. The door to the donation room had closed behind him, but the look on Victoria's face, the shock, the disbelief, lingered like a ghost. Victoria had been pacing in the hallway, watching as Marcus sat in the donation chair, his veins connected to the life-saving machine. She hadn't known what to think. Her mind was racing as she thought of the day's events, of her daughter lying in that hospital bed fighting for her life, and of the man whose blood would save her. The realization hit her like a slap to the face. The janitor, Marcus Webb, was the same man she had humiliated this morning, the one she had dismissed in front of her entire staff. How could she not have seen it? Marcus had sat quietly, offering no response when she had barked orders at him in the lobby. She had made assumptions about him based on his job, on his appearance. How many times had she done that in the past? Her world was filled with people like her, powerful, wealthy, important. She had always been the one in control, always the one who decided who was worthy of respect. But now, watching him give his blood for her daughter, the carefully constructed walls of her world began to crack. She had seen him only as a janitor, someone beneath her, but now he was the one who would save Emma. And it was clear, standing there in the sterile glow of the donation center, that he wasn't just a janitor. Marcus Webb was a father, a man who had lost so much but was still capable of giving, of sacrificing. She felt a knot form in her stomach. How could she have been so blind? Victoria found herself standing in the hallway, her heart pounding as the reality of the situation started to sink in. The man she had once disregarded was the one who had given his blood without hesitation, without thought of reward or recognition. She had judged him for what she saw as a weakness, but now she saw a strength in him she couldn't ignore. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking her thoughts. She pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was a message from her assistant, reminding her of the board meeting schedule for tomorrow morning. Victoria's mind flashed back to the tension of that morning, when she had been so focused on maintaining the facade of corporate power and control, only to have everything shattered by the crisis in the pediatric emergency room. Her phone buzzed again. It was an email from the company's CFO, asking for a final approval on a new investment proposal. She stared at the screen, the words blurring together as she let the weight of the day settle over her. She had worked her entire career to build something that mattered in the corporate world. And yet, in a moment of crisis, she had realized just how hollow that pursuit had been. All her years of ambition, her ruthless drive to climb the corporate ladder, had led her to a place where she had forgotten the very things that made people human. She had neglected to see the value in people like Marcus, who sacrificed everything for the ones they loved, for the ones they cared about. Her reflection was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. She looked up to find the coordinator standing in front of her, holding the blood bags. The procedure had been successful. Emma's vitals were stable. The transfusion had worked. Victoria felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was a hollow relief. Marcus Webb had saved her daughter's life, and she had no words to express the guilt, the shame that clung to her heart like a heavy weight. She turned and walked toward the donation room, her thoughts still racing. She needed to see him. She needed to thank him. Victoria paced back and forth in the sterile hospital hallway, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She hadn't expected any of this. The humbling realization that Marcus, the janitor she had so carelessly dismissed, was the one who had saved her daughter's life. She had always prided herself on being in control, on understanding people, on making decisions that ensured her success. Yet here she was, confronted by a man who had shown more grace, more humility, and more strength in a single moment than she had shown in her entire career. She stopped in front of the window, her eyes tracing the lights of the city below. The world felt so small now. The high-rise offices, the board meetings, the lavish lunches with corporate bigwigs, they all seemed distant, irrelevant. It was as though Marcus's quiet heroism had pulled back the veil that had covered her eyes for so long. She had climbed to the top of the corporate ladder, but at what cost? She thought back to her interactions with Marcus earlier that morning. She had looked at him as nothing more than a janitor, someone beneath her. The man who mopped the floors, who cleaned up after the important people, who was easily ignored. But now, she knew him differently. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a father who had lost everything, yet still managed to give selflessly to save a life. The shame she felt in that moment was overwhelming, and the guilt, it gnawed at her every time she thought about it. She had treated him with contempt, belittled him. And yet, without hesitation, he had chosen to save her daughter's life. She had been too busy climbing the corporate ladder, too focused on maintaining her image, to see the value of the people around her. And now, she was paying the price. Victoria's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. She turned to see Marcus approaching, his daughter Lily at his side. Lily's small form looked even smaller beside her father, her hand clutched tightly in his as they walked toward her. Marcus's face was pale, his movements slow, but his eyes, there was something in them that made her heart ache. He was exhausted, but there was no trace of bitterness, no trace of anger in the way he held himself. He was simply a man who had done what needed to be done. As they approached, Lily looked up at Victoria with wide eyes. The child had a quiet, inquisitive expression, as though she had no idea of the weight of the situation. She was just a little girl, trying to make sense of the world around her. "Hello, Miss Ashford," Lily said, her voice soft and polite, her eyes full of innocence. Victoria couldn't help but smile at the sincerity in the child's voice. It was a reminder of the pure, untainted joy that children possessed, something she had long ago forgotten how to access. "Hi, sweetie," Victoria replied softly, her voice tinged with emotion. She knelt down to Lily's level, Her hands clasped together nervously. "How are you feeling?" Lily smiled, her small hand still clutching the stuffed elephant that had become her constant companion since the moment they arrived at the hospital. "I'm okay." "Daddy's okay, too. He saved Emma." Victoria felt her heart tighten in her chest. The weight of the truth settled heavily on her shoulders. "Yes," she whispered. "He did." Marcus stood quietly behind his daughter, watching the exchange between the two women. His face was impassive, but there was a quiet strength in the way he carried himself. He had nothing to prove. He had done what needed to be done, and now all he wanted was to get Lily home. "Mr. Webb," Victoria said softly, looking up at him. She wasn't sure how to begin, how to apologize for everything she had done, everything she had said. How could she ever take back the way she had treated him, the way she had belittled him, reduced him to nothing more than a cleaning service, a man beneath her? Marcus's eyes met hers, and for a moment there was a flicker of something, perhaps curiosity, perhaps a touch of disbelief. But it was fleeting. He had learned long ago not to seek validation from people like her. The world had never been kind to him, but had taught him to be resilient. And right now, his daughter's health was the only thing that mattered. "You don't need to apologize," he said quietly, his voice steady and calm. There was no bitterness, no resentment, just acceptance. "I did what anyone would have done." Victoria felt the sting of his words, and for the first time in her life, she wondered if she had truly ever understood what it meant to be human. She had spent so much time building walls around herself, around her career, that she had forgotten the simple truth. Kindness, humility, and selflessness were the things that truly mattered in life. Not power, not wealth, not status. Marcus's word hung in the air between them, and for a brief moment there was silence. Silence filled with the weight of unspoken apologies and realizations. Then Victoria spoke again, her voice trembling. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving my daughter's life. I don't know how to repay you for that." Marcus looked down at Lily, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to repay me," he said softly. "I did it because I could." The simplicity of his words was like a punch to Victoria's gut. She had been so caught up in her own world, so focused on climbing the corporate ladder, that she had forgotten the real lessons that life had to offer. She stood up, her movements slow as she turned to Marcus. She needed to do something, anything, to show him that she understood the gravity of what he had done. "I want to help," she said, her voice firm now, filled with a new sense of purpose. "I want to make sure people like you, people who sacrifice everything for their families, are taken care of. I've been thinking about it, and I want to start a program at Ashford Industries, something that supports single parents, that helps them get the health insurance they need, that gives them the flexibility to care for their families without having to choose between work and their children." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "A program?" he asked, his voice cautious. Victoria nodded. "Yes, a program that treats people like you with the respect they deserve. I want to start something that makes a difference, something that helps families like yours." Marcus was silent for a long moment, and for the first time, Victoria felt the weight of her words. She knew she couldn't undo the past, couldn't take back the way she had treated him. But this was a chance to do something real, something that would make a difference. The boardroom at Ashford Industries was silent, save for the muffled sounds of paper shuffling and the soft hum of the air conditioning system. Victoria sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, her posture stiff, her hands folded in front of her. The usual sense of authority she carried with her was noticeably absent, replaced by a quiet uncertainty. She had always prided herself on her ability to command attention, to stand at the forefront of any conversation with unwavering confidence. But today, as she looked around the room at the faces of the board members, She felt the weight of the decision she had made the day before, of everything that had happened since Marcus had donated his blood, without hesitation, to save her daughter's life. Her gaze flickered over to Harold Weston, the chairman of the board, whose piercing eyes had been trained on her since she had walked into the room. His usual expression was one of calculated detachment, but today there was something else, something that almost looked like disdain. Victoria couldn't help but feel the weight of his scrutiny. "Victoria," Harold said, his voice cutting through the silence, "I assume you're aware of the concerns regarding your actions yesterday? We've had calls from investors. They're wondering why you abandoned a critical meeting in favor of, well, saving your daughter. It's personal, I understand, but it has left some very important matters hanging." Victoria straightened her back, her hands tightening around the edges of her papers. The weight of the room pressed down on her, but she couldn't back down now. She had made her choice, and she had to stand by it. "Harold," she began, her voice calm but steady, "I understand concerns. I do. But Emma's life was on the line, and I wasn't going to let anything or anyone stand in the way of making sure she had a fighting chance. Family comes first. Always." The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with the unspoken understanding that they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was personal. Harold cleared his throat. "We're all aware of your attachment to your family, Victoria, but the rest of us, well, we run a business. We're responsible for thousands of employees, and our investors are more concerned with financial stability than emotional decisions. They're not looking for a CEO who prioritizes family over the company. I hope you understand that." Victoria held his gaze, refusing to back down. "I'm not going to apologize for making sure my daughter had the chance to live. As for the company," she paused, taking a breath, "I've spent 15 years making sure Ashford Industries thrives. But I've also realized something important. If we're going to build a company that's truly successful, we have to put people first. The families who work for us, the ones who make this company run, they matter too." The room went silent again, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time, Victoria felt the truth of them in her bones. She had spent so many years working tirelessly to prove herself, but what had it really amounted to? A life of cold efficiency, a string of accomplishments that had left her hollow. Now, she had seen firsthand the kind of selflessness that could change everything. The quiet strength of Marcus Webb, the janitor, had shown her a path that she had long ignored. Harold's eyes narrowed. "And what exactly do you expect from us, Victoria? You want us to change the entire foundation of how we've done business for years? For what? A program for single parents." "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "I want to start a program that supports single parents at Ashford Industries. Health insurance, emergency child care, flexible hours. A place where they don't have to choose between their jobs and their families. I've seen what it's like to be a single parent, struggling to make ends meet, and I've seen what it takes for someone like Marcus to give everything for his daughter. That's the kind of company I want to build." Victoria leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "This program is about dignity. It's about valuing people, no matter their position. If you're not on board with that, then I'm not sure we have much left to discuss." For a moment, the room remained still, the tension thick. Harold opened his mouth to respond, but Victoria cut him off. "You can either support this change, or you can replace me. But I won't apologize for caring about the people who make this company run. I won't apologize for wanting to make a difference." The silence in the room stretched on, and Victoria felt her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment. She had put everything on the line, her reputation, her career, her image as a leader. But it felt right. It felt like the only way forward. Harold finally nodded, his expression unreadable. "We'll discuss it," But you should know this is a decision that will be taken lightly. Victoria nodded, her eyes never leaving his. I understand, but just know I'm not going back. With that, she stood and walked out of the room, her steps firm and resolute. As the door swung shut behind her, she took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in what felt like ages. The next few days blurred together in a haze of meetings, phone calls, and reports. Victoria's mind raced constantly, never fully able to let go of the conversation in the boardroom. Her proposal for the single parent support program had been met with mixed reactions. Some of the board members were cautiously optimistic, while others, like Harold, had voiced strong reservations. But in the back of her mind, there was a voice urging her to keep going, to fight for the change she knew was necessary. As the days passed, she found herself returning to the hospital, her thoughts constantly drifting back to Marcus Webb, the janitor who had saved her daughter's life. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his steady gaze, his quiet determination. She thought of his sacrifice, the way he had given his blood without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. It haunted her. And then there was the moment when she had looked into his eyes in the donation center, when the realization hit her like a tidal wave. He had not only saved her daughter, he had saved her from the shallow, cold world she had created for herself. He had shown her a life she had never allowed herself to live, a life where people mattered more than profits, where kindness wasn't seen as a weakness but a strength. It was a kind of life she had abandoned, the life she had pushed aside in her pursuit of power and success. But now, she couldn't ignore it any longer. She couldn't pretend that the corporate world was enough. The memory of that day in the hospital followed her everywhere. It even crept into her dreams, where she saw Marcus, standing tall and unflinching, the blood flowing from his arm to save her daughter. In her dreams, he was always there, silent, steadfast, and strong. And in those dreams, she knew what she had to do. The sound of the elevator doors opening interrupted her thoughts. She had just finished a series of back-to-back meetings in her office, and as she stepped out into the hall, she saw a familiar figure. It was Marcus. Her breath caught in her throat as she watched him approach, his face still pale from the blood donation, but there was something in his expression that made her heart ache. He was holding something in his hand, a folded piece of construction paper, decorated with crayon drawings and flowers. Lily was standing beside him, clutching a stuffed elephant, her face filled with curiosity and excitement. The sight of the two of them standing there, so small, so vulnerable, made Victoria feel a pang of guilt. She had been so focused on herself, so consumed by her own world, that she had failed to see the humanity in people like Marcus. People who did the real work, the ones who made everything else possible. Miss Ashford, Marcus said, his voice as calm and steady as always, though there was an unfamiliar hesitation in his tone. I hope it's not too much trouble. Lily wanted to make a card for Emma. Victoria's heart fluttered as she looked down at the crayon-covered card in Marcus's hand. It was so simple, so innocent. The drawings were far from perfect, but they were full of life, full of hope. Of course, Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. She knelt down, her eyes meeting Lily's. I'm sure Emma will love it. Lily smiled shyly, her small hands pressing the card into Victoria's palm. I hope she feels better, she said, her voice sweet and earnest. Victoria felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't know how to thank this man for what he had done, for what he had given. The words seemed so inadequate. Thank you, Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible. For everything. Marcus nodded, but his expression remained neutral. He wasn't looking for gratitude. He had done what any father would have done. And for him, that was enough. We just wanted to let Emma know we're thinking of her, Marcus said, his voice soft but steady. He looked at Victoria for a moment, his eyes searching hers. There was a flicker of something, an understanding that had passed between them, something unspoken but undeniable. He had been humiliated, dismissed, ignored, and yet he had saved her daughter's life without a second thought. Victoria looked down at the card, her heart swelling with gratitude, but also with something more, a growing sense of admiration for the man who had shown her, in his quiet way, what it meant to truly live. Later that afternoon, Victoria found herself in her office again, sitting in front of her desk, the crayon-covered card resting gently in front of her. She traced her finger over the uneven lines of the drawings, over the flowers that Lily had drawn with such care. The simplicity of it made her feel both overwhelmed and deeply moved. Her phone buzzed with an incoming email, snapping her back to reality. But even as she read to the business updates, her mind kept drifting back to Marcus. She couldn't stop thinking about the quiet dignity he carried, the way he had given everything for his daughter. And she couldn't ignore the way he had made her feel. Small, humbled, and utterly incapable of ever truly understanding the sacrifices that people like him made every single day. It was clear now. She had spent so many years focusing on the wrong things, climbing the corporate ladder, striving for power, trying to build something that was never truly hers. But Marcus, with his quiet strength, had shown her that the true measure of success was not in numbers or status. It was in the love you gave, the people you helped, and the sacrifices you made for those you cared about. Victoria sat back in her chair, taking a deep breath. She had a decision to make, a big one. The board had already expressed their concerns about the changes she wanted to implement. They were hesitant, reluctant to make a shift in the company culture. But she knew what needed to be done. The company had to change. It had to be more than just a business. It had to be a place that valued its people, a place where every employee, whether they were an executive or a janitor, felt like they mattered. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about humanity. It was about giving people dignity. And she was going to make it happen. The morning of the company-wide announcement arrived far too quickly for Victoria's comfort. She had spent the last few days putting the final touches on a proposal for the single-parent support program, making sure that it was as comprehensive as it could be. She had worked late into the night, revising the details, refining the messaging, preparing for the questions she knew were coming. The board had expressed concern, and the shareholders had voiced their doubts. But Victoria knew this was the right decision. This was the kind of change that would define the future of Ashford Industries. The employees in the lobby were already gathered when she stepped out of the elevator. They stood in small groups, chatting in hushed tones. But when they saw her, the room fell into a sudden quiet. The eyes of the room were on her, waiting for her to speak. Victoria wasn't used to this kind of attention in the corporate world. She had always been the one to command the room, to have every eye on her. But today, it was different. Today, she wasn't just a CEO. Today, she was a woman standing in front of her employees, hoping they would see the humanity behind the title. Her heels clicked against the polished marble floors as she walked to the center of the room, her eyes scanning the crowd. She saw familiar faces, the engineers, the receptionists, the janitors, everyone who made Ashford Industries run. And in the back of the room, she saw Marcus Webb, standing quietly with Lily by his side. His eyes met hers for a brief moment, and she felt the weight of everything she had learned in the past few days crash down on her all at once. Victoria took a deep breath before stepping up to the podium. She could feel the nervous energy in the room, but she pushed it aside. This was her moment to show them all that she had changed. She had learned. She had grown. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady, though it felt foreign to her. "Thank you for being here today." She paused, glancing down at the papers in front of her, the words she had rehearsed over and over again running through her mind. But today, she didn't need a script. She needed to speak from the heart. I know many of you are aware of the challenges we've faced in recent weeks, especially the announcement of the new program for single parents, she continued. And I understand there are concerns. There always are when change is involved. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, some nodding in agreement, others crossing their arms. Victoria could feel the skepticism in the air, the doubt hanging like a cloud. But she pressed on, determined to make them see what she saw now. I've spent the last few days thinking about something very important, she said, her voice growing firmer. I've spent years building Ashford Industries into what it is today. But I've realized something crucial. Success isn't just about profits. It's about people. It's about you, the ones who make this company run. The ones who show up every day and give their time, their energy, and their dedication. Whether you're working in the boardroom or in the break room, you all matter. She let the words hang in the air for a moment, watching the faces of the employees in front of her. She saw the surprise in some eyes, the disbelief in others. But she saw something else, too. Curiosity. The idea that maybe, just maybe, this new direction could be something worth believing in. I was once blind to this, she continued. I was so focused on climbing the corporate ladder, on building my own success, that I forgot to see the people who were actually making everything happen. I forgot to see the heart of this company. Victoria's eyes flicked toward Marcus, standing at the back of the room with Lily. His expression was unreadable, but there was a quiet strength in his presence. She knew he was waiting for her to follow through on her words. I've learned that it's not enough to build a business, she said, her voice softening. You have to build a community where every person is valued, where single parents don't have to choose between a paycheck and their child's health, where employees are supported not just for what they can do for the company, but for who they are, because without you, there is no Ashford Industries. Victoria took another deep breath, her heart racing now, but it felt right. She was no longer afraid of the consequences. She was no longer afraid of the judgment. Today, she said, standing tall, we're launching Victoria Web Single Parent Initiative. This program will provide health insurance, emergency child care, flexible scheduling, and paid family leave for our employees. It's a program that values people, that puts families first. And it's just the beginning. The room was silent for a moment, as if the weight of her words was sinking in. And then, as if on cue, a low murmur spread through the crowd. It started as a whisper, a quiet exchange between colleagues, and then grew louder. Victoria could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The skepticism was still there, but now there was hope, too. The applause came slowly at first, unsure, but it grew louder with every passing second. Employees began clapping, nodding, smiling. Victoria felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had done it. She had taken the first step. As the applause died down, she looked at Marcus again. This time, their eyes met for a longer moment. She saw something in his gaze, something that was more than just gratitude. It was a recognition of the change she had made, of the shift in herself that she could never undo. Lily, standing beside Marcus, tugged at his sleeve, whispering something in his ear. He knelt down to listen, and Victoria could see the small smile he gave her in response. She watched the two of them, father and daughter, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was finally on the right path. The program had just been announced, but the real work was just beginning. Victoria knew that there would be challenges ahead, resistance from those who clung to the old way of doing things. But she was ready. She had changed, and so had Ashford Industries. The days following the announcement were a whirlwind of discussions, emails, and meetings. Victoria spent long hours in her office, fielding questions from the board, addressing concerns from senior management, and working tirelessly to implement the details of the new program. There were skeptics in the room, as she had expected. people who viewed the shift in company culture as nothing more than a PR stunt. But she wasn't deterred. Every night, when she returned home, she thought about Marcus and Lily, their quiet faces etched into her mind. The simple act of Marcus donating blood, the way he had sacrificed his own well-being to save her daughter, had irrevocably changed her. Victoria had never thought much about people like Marcus before, those who lived their lives quietly, humbly, unnoticed by the world around them. But now, as she looked at the policies she was working to implement, she realized just how much she had missed by living in her own bubble of corporate power and privilege. She had spent years chasing accolades, titles, and wealth, but had never been enough. There was always another deal, another promotion, another milestone to achieve. She had pushed aside relationships, human connections, and empathy for the sake of success. She had believed that sacrifice was the key to climbing higher and higher. But what had it truly gotten her? Victoria closed her eyes for a moment, letting the quiet of her office wash over her. There was a nagging thought in her mind, something that had been growing since her meeting with Marcus that day in the hospital. She hadn't just learned something about Ashford Industries. She had learned something about herself. The next morning, Victoria arrived early at the office, determined to push through the growing pains of the new program. She knew there would be pushback. There always was when you try to change something as entrenched as a company culture. But this was important. It was bigger than just business. It was about people. As she stepped into the main lobby of Ashford Industries, she was greeted by the sight of employees bustling about, moving to and fro, preparing for the day ahead. There was a different energy in the air today, though, a quiet anticipation, like the calm before a storm. It was as if the employees were waiting to see if the changes she had promised would actually come to fruition. Victoria made her way to the elevator, her thoughts focused on the presentation she had to deliver in the next hour. As the doors opened, she stepped inside, pressing the button for the top floor. The familiar hum of the elevator filled the silence, but today it felt different. The weight of responsibility hung heavy on her shoulders, but there was something else, too. Hope. The door slid open, and she walked into the boardroom, where the senior executives were already seated, waiting for her. Harold Weston, the chairman of the board, was the first to speak. "Victoria, good morning," he said, his tone as cold as ever. "We're all here to discuss the single-parent initiative and its potential impact on the company. I trust you have some updates for us." Victoria nodded, her gaze steady as she set her briefcase on the table and opened the folder in front of her. "Yes, I do," she replied. "I've had extensive discussions with HR, and we've outlined the key components of the program. We're moving forward with providing subsidized health insurance, emergency childcare, flexible work hours, and paid family leave for our employees." There was a pause as the board members exchanged looks. Some of them nodded approvingly, but others remained silent, their expressions unreadable. Harold's gaze was sharp, calculating. "And how exactly do you expect this to affect the company's bottom line?" Harold asked. "These are significant expenses we're talking about. There's no denying that." Victoria didn't hesitate. "The bottom line is important, yes, but so is the well-being of our employees. If we want Ashford Industries to thrive in the long term, we need to prioritize our people. A happy, healthy workforce is a productive one. This program will not only improve employee satisfaction and retention, but will also boost morale, which in turn will have a positive impact on the company's overall performance." Harold raised an eyebrow. "You're asking us to take a risk here, Victoria. A big one. We can't afford to make decisions based solely on idealism." "I'm not asking for idealism," Victoria replied, her voice firm. "I'm asking for a commitment to our employees. A commitment to building a company that values people above profits. A company that sets an example for others in the industry." This program isn't just about charity. It's about doing what's right. There was a tense silence in the room, but for the first time, Victoria felt as though she had the board's attention. She wasn't sure they were convinced yet, but she could tell that the tone had shifted. They were listening. Later that afternoon, Victoria found herself standing in the lobby once again, this time with a different purpose. She had spent the morning discussing the program with her HR team and gathering feedback from employees. There were still skeptics, but the response had been overwhelmingly positive. The idea that the company was finally listening to the needs of its employees was a game changer. As she walked through the lobby, she spotted Marcus. He was pushing a cleaning cart near the executive elevators, his movement slow but deliberate. He looked up when he saw her approaching, his eyes meeting hers without hesitation. There was a quiet strength in his gaze, a sense of dignity that Victoria could no longer ignore. "Mr. Webb," she said, stopping in front of him, "I wanted to personally thank you for everything you've done, for saving my daughter, for inspiring me to make these changes." Marcus nodded, his expression neutral, but there was something in his eyes that made Victoria's chest tighten. "I did what any father would do," he said simply. "I didn't do it for thanks." Victoria's heart skipped a beat. She had heard those words before, when she had first spoken to him in the donation center. He wasn't looking for gratitude, and in a strange way, that made her respect him even more. "I want you to know," she continued, "that we're moving forward with a single-parent initiative. It's happening, and I want you to be a part of it." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his gaze sharp. "A part of it?" "Yes," she said, her voice unwavering. "I want you to help design the program. You know what it's like to live with the challenges of being a single parent. You have a perspective that's invaluable." For a moment, Marcus said nothing. He seemed to be weighing her words, considering the offer. Finally, he spoke. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady. "But it has to be real, not just a corporate gesture. It has to make a real difference." Victoria nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "It will. I promise." The atmosphere in the boardroom had shifted. What started as a tense meeting about the viability of the single-parent support program was now a discussion about the future of Ashford Industries, a future that was slowly being redefined by Victoria's bold choices. For the first time, the executives were listening, not just to her, but to the idea that the company's values could evolve, that they could reflect something deeper than just profit margins. Marcus had agreed to help design the program, and now, a week later, they were meeting again to finalize the details. Victoria had been working closely with HR, consulting with legal teams, and even reviewing the company's financial projections to ensure that the initiative would be sustainable. But today, she was finally able to sit down with Marcus and get his input. It wasn't just about offering health benefits or paid family leave. It was about creating a culture that truly supported the people who made Ashford Industries successful, regardless of their title or role. As she arrived at the conference room, Marcus was already there, seated at the table with a laptop open in front of him. He had his sleeves rolled up, his focus entirely on the numbers and graphs on the screen. There was no fanfare, no grandiose presentations. It was just Marcus doing the work. She couldn't help but admire that about him. "Good morning," Victoria said as she walked in, taking a seat across from him. She noticed a slight exhaustion in his eyes, a reminder of the long hours he had put in alongside her to make the program a reality. "Morning," Marcus replied, glancing up at her for a moment before returning his attention to the screen. "I've made a few adjustments to the payout structure for the healthcare portion. We need to make sure it's scalable, especially with the number of employees we have. I don't want this to be another one-time initiative that fizzles out." Victoria nodded, impressed by how thoughtful and thorough Marcus was. "I agree. We need this to be sustainable, and we can't afford to offer it to just a select few." Every single parent in this company should have access to it, no exceptions. They spent the next hour discussing the details, the eligibility criteria, the benefits package, and the logistics of rolling out the program company-wide. Victoria made sure to listen intently, relying on Marcus's real-world experience to guide their decisions. There were things he mentioned that she had never considered: how difficult it was for single parents to find emergency childcare, the importance of flexible work hours, and the hidden costs of raising a child alone. As they finalized the details, Victoria felt a surge of excitement. This wasn't just a policy change. It was a movement, a cultural shift within Ashford Industries. They weren't just talking about family benefits. They were talking about dignity, about respect, about showing the people who made the company run that they mattered. When the meeting ended, Marcus stood up, closing his laptop. "I think we've got everything in place. We're ready to present this to the board." Victoria stood too, feeling the weight of the decision that was about to unfold. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, her voice full of genuine gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you." Marcus gave a small smile, but his eyes were guarded, as if he was used to being overlooked and didn't expect any recognition. "You did all the work. I just helped fill in the gaps." Victoria couldn't help but laugh softly. "Still, you're the reason this program will actually make a difference. You've given us the perspective we needed. People like you, people who do the work and live the struggle, are the ones who know what this really means. I'm just here to make sure it happens." Later that afternoon, the boardroom was packed with executives, department heads, and a few key investors. Victoria stood at the front, ready to present the finalized details of the single-parent initiative. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment when she would show everyone, once and for all, that Ashford Industries could be a company that truly valued its people. The room was eerily quiet, the air heavy with anticipation. Harold Weston sat near the end of the table, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. He was the one she needed to convince the most. If he wasn't on board, the rest of the board would never approve the initiative. Victoria began her presentation, walking the room through the specifics of the program. She spoke passionately about its importance, her voice steady and confident, though inside her heart raced. She knew the numbers, she knew the logistics, but what she truly needed to sell was the idea that a company could do well by doing good, that Ashford Industries could thrive by investing in the well-being of its employees. Not just their work, but their lives. As she finished the presentation, she looked around the room, searching for signs of agreement. Some faces were skeptical, others neutral. But when her gaze fell on Harold, she saw something different. There was a flicker of something, perhaps respect, perhaps begrudging admiration, as he leaned forward in his chair. "Victoria," Harold said, his voice low but firm, "this is bold, and frankly, it's risky. But I can't argue with the logic. If this program helps our employees, helps them stay with us longer, it could pay off in the long run." Victoria held her breath as Harold paused, the room hanging on his next words. "I'm willing to give it a shot, but there are conditions. We need clear metrics for success, and we need to ensure that this is sustainable. If it doesn't work, we pull the plug. Understand?" Victoria nodded. "I understand. We'll set measurable goals and ensure we're tracking the program's impact. But I believe in this, Harold. I truly believe it will make a difference." Harold nodded, giving a slight smile. "All right, you've got my support. Let's make it happen." Victoria exhaled, a wave of relief flooding through her. It wasn't over yet. There would still be challenges, adjustments, and skeptics to win over. But this was a significant step forward. She had the board's approval. The program was going to be implemented. She glanced over at Marcus, who was standing quietly in the corner of the room. His eyes met hers, and for the first time since their initial meeting, she saw something different in his gaze. There was pride there now, but more than that, there was respect. And for Victoria, that was more than she had ever expected.